Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome along to Oulton Park for what is round two of the 2023 Ferrari Challenge Trofeo Pirelli UK. It's the second weekend of racing. There were two races that took place at Snetterton, so it's round three that we've got coming up for you very shortly in what are pretty much ideal conditions for racing. It was wet this morning, but the sunshine is beautiful today. 17 degrees, track temperature is perfect, and very light wind as well. So ideal conditions to go racing. The drivers will be hugely keen to get on and get around this fantastic circuit. So it's the second weekend of racing for 2023. We opened up our first weekend of racing at Snetterton in Norfolk before we then went to Oulton Park here for two races this weekend. Then it's on to Brands Hatch before we go to Silverstone, and the final weekend is over to Belgium, Spa-Francorchamps, over the course of the 15th, the 16th and the 17th of September. That's when we'll crown our champions. So the cars are starting to make their way out onto the circuit. But before we look at what's going on here at Oulton Park, let's just turn the clock back a little bit and have a look at some of the highlights from Snetterton.
Over the line they charge as the 2023 season gets underway. Side by side, last of the late breakers, and Carl Cavers goes through. Checker flag in the wind, goes to Morrow. And Andrew Morrow with the best lap of the weekend. Terrific move from Paul Simerson. Andrew Morrow takes the checkered flag.
So those were the highlights from Snetterton for the opening two races of the 2023 championship season. So based on those results at Snetterton, in terms of Trofeo Pirelli, the two wins at Snetterton means that Andrew Morrow leads the championship on 36 championship points. But because Hans Sickens and Carl Cavers both gained a second and a third place respectively, both H. Sickens and Carl Cavers are jointly tied on 24 points in the championship, with John Dillon in third, Faisal Al-Faisal is there in fourth, and Graham Desir is in fifth position in Trofeo Pirelli. So that's the way the Trofeo Pirelli standings look after the first couple of races. What about Coppa Shell, I hear you ask? Well, Coppa Shell, again, it was a very similar story in some respects, in that there was one driver that claimed the win in both of the races in the Coppa Shell section at Snetterton, and certainly that driver will be looking to build on that solid weekend here. So Paul Hogarth tops the standings on 33 championship points. Second is Stuart Marsden, who finished on the podium in both of the races there, and Paul Simerson is third. Jonathan Satchell, Chris Smith and Julian Dye complete the top six, and then it's Peter Hunter, William Terrier, who I don't think is able to start the racing here today, eighth, Robert Rees and Paul Rogers wrap up the top 10 after the first two races as Snetterton. So that's the way that the points stand. How about trying to catch up with some of the drivers? There's plenty of names to get used to. Let's have a look and meet our drivers.
I like the fact that it's a really quick track, and obviously we're in very quick cars, so getting the maximum performance out of this race really does demonstrate how quick the car is.
Last year was my first win ever in racing, so special place in my heart. Quite a technical track, struggled a lot originally with the two hairpins, but no, look, the whole track seemed to just work well. I don't mind the high speed stuff, so it works quite good for me.
Visibility is good, it's a wide track, and it's the first race that I've ever had is in Snetterton.
I particularly like the first corner, turn 1, Rich's, and you can really sell it in as long as you sight that apex well.
The last sector, I think, is one of the hardest sectors on the circuit for me. You know, there's a lot of hard braking, but you've got to carry a lot of speed under the bridge. So I think that part onwards into Coram, the last corner, then onto the start-finish straight is my favourite.
I really love Sector 3. You come barreling down the back straight there, and quite a complex, hard braking into a hard left where you're trying to de-brake and keep it straight. Heading into Brundle, Nelson, and then send it into Bomb Hole, then almost flat in Coram. Just really, really fun, fast stuff. So yeah, really enjoying it.
The bomb hole is just, it should be so easy. It is so hard to get right, because if you don't get that right, you're basically got the next 200 metres of a corner that you're approaching wrong.
Coram is something that I found so scary for my first couple of years, but actually if you just embrace it and think I'm going to seesaw this wheel and keep my foot pinned to the floor until I just can't, it's actually quite fun.
Kind of a tricky one, isn't it? But if you get it right, obviously you get a long stretch, which is good for the car, so it's an important turn.
It's quite a technical corner. It runs on for quite a long time, so if you get it right, it's good for your lap time. If you get it wrong, it really takes its toll.
So a great introduction to our drivers who were there at Snetterton, and most of those names are on the grid here at Oulton Park. The grid is filling up, so it's time to hand down to Brian Oliver, who's down there on the grid.
Brian.
Welcome to the grid of Oulton Park. Onto the grid here, a proper old school circuit. 2.69 miles around, and it is a wonderful circuit. Used to be the site of Oulton Hall back in the day, but in 1926 Oulton Hall burnt to the ground and this circuit rose from its ashes, literally. Behind me you can see Deer's Leap. There's an interesting name for a corner, a proper old school name for a corner. And ahead of us, we'll get towards turn 1 in a bit, will be the Old Hall turn. Behind us is over 10,000 collective prancing horsepowers of Ferrari 488 Evo cars, and we're really excited to be here for race 3 of the season. So we are going to take a little walk up the grid now and see what we can find. These wonderful cars all lining up. Their tension here is electric. We're pleased to say that the weather has dried up after a wet qualifying this morning. The weather has now dried up. It's slick tyres all around. I'm going to have a quick word. I haven't asked him yet. This is Chris Smith's driver coach. So a lot of work for Chris to do from a long way back on the grid today.
Yeah, definitely. No, unfortunately, we got unlucky in qualifying with unfortunately going with track limits on our best laps. So we know we have the pace to go forward. Obviously, Oulton Park is hard to overtake, especially with the cars being quite big. But we've been over it. We'll just see what Chris can do. Hopefully the best, really.
And will you be communicating with him as the race goes on?
Yeah, I mean, with Chris, obviously, as much as we work together as well with his as his coach, I feel like we're friends as well. So when he's in the car, I feel like I'm driving myself. So I'll try and leave as much up to him as I can, but I will be giving him some advice.
Fantastic. I love that. It's all about the bond and the friendship as well as just coaching. That's fantastic. Thank you for talking to us. Great stuff. Good luck for today. So we carry on moving up the grid as we head towards the next row of cars here. And it is a fantastic view just to see all of these Ferrari 488 Evo cars getting ready. It's a relatively short run up into turn 1, the Old Hall turn. So it's going to be quite lively into that first corner. The track is very narrow. You can see how narrow it is. And you can see how beautiful these cars are. As we look at the Jonathan Satchel car, the Evo car, lots of aerodynamic tweaks. And I was just looking earlier, little attentions to detail, like the little winglets under the wing mirrors, little winglets and aerofoils and bits everywhere. You see on the bonnet there's little flick-ups as well. These cars absolutely beautifully engineered and built in Maranello for these drivers to entertain us here this afternoon. Paul Rogers, he's a long way back on the grid. He's got a lot of work to do from there. Now, I don't know whether he's going to thank me for saying hello to him. Paul, you've got a bit of work to do from there. You had a... what would Elon Musk refer to as a sudden disassembly at the last round, but I may remind you that you won your first race at this event last year, so you must be feeling confident of moving forward from here.
Yeah, I mean, I love this circuit. It's one of my favourite circuits. I would have preferred to have qualified a bit further up, but we had a couple of issues with the car. It's a new car, because my last one was written off, unfortunately, and new to me today. So we didn't get to test last week. So I was a little bit kind of, behind the ball today, but we'll try and make the best of it. I'm sitting P3 in class. I've got 2 Pirellis out of place in front of me. They're going to make some moves, and I'm going to try and follow them through.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. And the Fox 2, I think you're calling it, aren't you? The Purple Fox, number 2 on the grid. Good luck. Good luck with that. Thank you. Great to have a word with the driver. I can imagine that the nerves must be flowing here on the grid as they get ready to go and to take that green flag. I could just see somebody here I'd like to. He's probably going to not thank me for saying this. I'm going to say hello, Francesco Barli, isn't it? Hello, the race director for Ferrari North Europe. Have I got that correct?
Quite correct indeed.
Close.
Head of Ferrari North Europe.
Head of.
Regional manager of
Head
Ferrari
of.
North Europe.
Lovely to have you. You must be so pleased with what's going on with Ferrari UK at the moment.
Yeah, very much so. We are so happy today about the weather as well, which this morning was not as good, but now it is. And so looking forward for a very nice race today.
Fantastic. I hope you're enjoying your time here at Oulton Park this weekend. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And you as well. Have a good time.
Well, I'm absolutely loving it. Thank you very much for speaking to us. Wonderful stuff. So Francesco Barli, and we'll get his job description right next time we talk to him. That's the John Dillon car. He's a driver who works very, very hard indeed. He's on a dual campaign also with the Ferrari European Challenge. And he's down on the 4th row, I'll make that. And so he's got a good opportunity. He was featuring at the top of the timesheets when it was raining earlier on this morning in the free practice. So he's got some good pace. A man here who has shown great pace, Paul Hogarth. Now, he's a driver who was showing the Trofeo Pirelli drivers a clean pair of heels at one point during qualifying. It was ahead of a lot of them right until the very closing stages of qualifying. I'm wondering whether Paul might be willing to have a word with us. We'll just try and maneuver around here. And Paul, you've had a great qualifying. You were looking very rapid all day. You can do quite a bit from here, can't you?
I would hope so, Dave. Sorry, Brian. I would love to. Yeah, I think. I need a good, clean start. Not be as messy as Snetterton was, and see if we can get on the tail and see what we can do from here. Excited.
You look very dialed in qualifying this morning. It looked like you were ahead of quite a few of the Trofeo Pirelli drivers, so you must be pretty excited about that. And of course, you are the current undefeated in the first 2 races in the Coppa Shell category this year. So can we make it 3 out of 3?
We'll certainly be giving it our very, very best.
Thank you for taking the time to speak to us, and good luck for the race. So, yes, a reference to Dave Richardson there, who is normally the man on the grid, but you have this slimmer, lower downforce version this year. He'll be back for the next round at Brands Hatch. So we're moving towards the front of the grid now, the 2nd row of the grid. And Paul Simonson lines up and alongside the Carl Cavers car in the Coppa Shell category. And Paul Simonson, the highest qualifying Coppa Shell car. And Paul over here will be getting ready. We're going to interrupt other cameramen. Paul, a very, very quick word. How are you feeling? Another driver who was out-qualifying the Trofeo Pirelli drivers for much of qualifying this morning. You must be delighted with this starting position.
Yeah, not very often I find myself up this far up the grid, but yeah, I'm quite happy. But still got my sun cream on, happy days.
So you're a man who has been loving every minute of this since you arrived at Oulton Park here, haven't you?
Well, I've not just loved it, I've loved it for the last 5 years. Yeah, it's brilliant, brilliant championship, great people, good bunch of drivers. Yeah, it's good fun, nice paddock.
Brilliant. Good luck for the race this afternoon. Driver who absolutely...
This one's for my daughter. She's doing her GCSEs, I'm really proud of her. So this one's for you, Mia.
Brilliant stuff. So good luck to her. She's doing her GCSEs at the moment. We can hear the sirens to say that the grid is about to clear. We're going to take a quick look at the front row of the grid. Andrew Morrow and H. Sickens, they have been the men to beat all the way through this session and all the way through free practice and all the way through qualifying. Andrew Morrow, well, it didn't look like he was going to put it on pole position for a while, but then suddenly in the closing stages of qualifying, he popped up and he came in very much under the radar. A very rapid lap to put the car on pole position. You can see there, he's now belted into the car, the door is closed, the driver coaches are clearing from the grid, and very, very shortly these cars are going to start on their formation lap. It will be the third race of this 10-race season. It's going to be very exciting. A track that is so difficult for overtaking. So these grid positions have been absolutely critical. We're going to see how they get on. I'm going to hand you back now to our commentators. We have Mark Werrell and Adam Weller up in the commentary box to take you through race 3 for the Ferrari Challenge here at Oulton Park.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, great to catch up with some of the drivers on their grid, and we're looking forward to this half-an-hour race that is coming up. Adam Weller joins myself, Mark Werrell, in commentary. Adam, Ferraris get to stretch their legs on what is now a beautifully dry circuit. As I alluded to at the very top end of this programme, ideal racing conditions out there now.
It really is. It's gone from quite a sodden morning into a rather beautiful afternoon here at the Oulton Park circuit, using the full international layout as well, so a better part of 2.7 miles of tarmac to play with. And it's the kind of circuit that entices you to make moves. There's a lot of good overtaking opportunities, lots of good braking zones on the circuit, but of course it's also very narrow indeed, which means that any overtake around this circuit is well earned and well deserved. The racing like this, spec racing with such powerful GT cars, always an exciting recipe when paired with the Oulton Park circuit. I'm excited to see whether anyone can end the streak of Andrew Morrow coming out of Snetterton.
Yeah, he was dominant at Snetterton, wasn't it? He was fastest in free practice 1, fastest in free practice 2. He took pole position for race 1 and claimed the win. He took pole position for race 2 and claimed the win as well. So whilst this weekend he hasn't exclusively had things all his own way, what with the weather conditions this morning, meaning that H. Sickins was fastest in free practice 1 and John Dillon was fastest in free practice 2 in the slightly curtailed session, he's back to pole position. So far this season, Andrew Morrow has started every race from pole and has won both of the races. So he's the man to beat, isn't he, at this stage?
Yeah, absolutely marked himself as the favourite coming out of Snetterton. But of course, every circuit on this 2023 calendar presents a unique and different challenge. When we head to Spa at the end of the season, I'm sure that for quite a few of our drivers, that'll be a first time out at the legendary Belgian circuit. Oulton Park, a circuit that most of our drivers are familiar with. It's where Andrew Morrow made his Ferrari Challenge UK debut last year at the season opener here in Cheshire. And yeah, very much looking forward to this. Excited to see that formation lap get underway.
Yeah, you say they all offer their unique challenge. Case in point, the next 2 races after Oulton Park, the next 2 races we go to Brands Hatch, but we race on both configurations down there. We race the Indy circuit one day, the Grand Prix circuit the following.
Yes, that's a unique setup and quite an exciting one at that, isn't it? Sometimes, I think very rarely I've seen it happen at Donington too, but it's a very rare thing to have 2 different configurations in use in that manner. And yeah, those are 2 very challenging configurations, all of their own, of course. MSVR, part of the organising party for this series, and this is another of the MSV circuits.
So before the cars head off on their formation lap, we will just wait for the countdown board to click through, and then they will be released onto this last opportunity to get the temperature into the brakes on the cars, build the core temperature in those tyres, which is not just a case of weaving from side to side, but on and off the brakes. That radiates the heat out from the brake disc and the caliper into the wheel rim, which then penetrates the carcass of the tyre. So it's not just about getting surface temperature into the tyre, it's getting temperature into the body of the tyre. 30-second board is held aloft, and then they will start to head off on their final formation lap. As Adam said, almost 2.7 miles. It's 2.6920 miles, the Oulton Park International Circuit. And with the fantastic grid of Ferraris all as ever immaculately presented. They will head off on what will be their final formation lap. So away goes the safety car, and then the green flag is waved from the gantry, and off go the cars onto their final formation lap in advance of round 3 of the 2023 Ferrari Challenge Trofeo Pirelli UK. Great grid of cars. You can see on the left of your screen Stuart Marsden's car, which was not able to finish the qualifying session. He's going to start from the pit lane, so he will maybe be just offered up towards the tail end of the grid. So let's go racing. Through the grid and the way they line up. Pole position goes the way of Andrew Morrow, and alongside him is H. Sickins. Row 2 of the grid, on the inside of the second row of the grid, that's where we will see the car of Carl Cavers. So it's Andrew Morrow and H. Sickins on row number 1. It's Carl Cavers and the fastest car in Coppa Shell that sits alongside him, which is Paul Simerson, who we spoke to on the grid. Row 3 of the grid, on the inside, it is going to be Paul Hogarth, and alongside is Faisal Al Faisal. And then we head to row number 4 of the grid, and that is where we see the likes of John Dillon and Graham Dezeal. The next row of the grid, on the inside, it is going to be Paul Rogers that sits there on the inside, and alongside him is Jonathan Satchell. With row 6 of the grid being on the inside line, it is Chris Smith, and he has got for company the car of Peter Hunter. And the final row of the grid is Julian Dye, who is scheduled to have lined up with Stuart Marsden, but Stuart's car will, as we have seen, start from the pit lane. So that is the way that they line up for what is the 3rd round of the championship. 15 points if you win your class, whether it be Trofeo Pirelli or Coppa Shell, 12 for second, 10 for third, 8 for fourth, and so on. It diminishes. Extra point for pole position. We know that's already going the way of Andrew Morrow and Paul Simerson in their respective classes. And there's an extra point for fastest lap as well.
Absolutely. And Paul Simerson, I was about to point out, strikes me as the potential spoiler on those first 2 rows of the grid. Paul Simerson is always a driver who takes up the opportunity to fight for a position, be it for class position or otherwise. And with that extra motivation he mentioned, his daughter's doing her GCSEs, and he wants to put on a good show on her behalf here today. I reckon Simerson, from 4th on the grid, he'll be thinking, you know what, overall podium is not out of question here.
No, absolutely not. No, the highest placed Coppa Shell car in any of the races at Snetterton was 5th place, where Paul Hogarth finished 5th in the first race of the weekend. But for Paul Simerson, yeah, it could be if he pushes hard. And he said this one was for Mia, and the Grey Paul Birmingham backed car in the hands of the man who finished 3rd in Coppa Shell last year. Could he finish on the overall podium? Well, we'll find out in just over 30 minutes time, because the cars are heading up towards the final corner at Lodge. The red lights are on the gantry. The Ferrari pace car will peel its way right into the pit lane, left as you look on your screens, and then for the rolling start it will be Andrew Morrow and H. Sickins that will be side by side. Lights are on the gantry, 30 minutes on the clock. For the 3rd time this year we go racing in the Ferrari Challenge UK, and both front row men match each other for pace as they charge their way up towards Old Hall Corner, but H. Sickins has the outside line as they head through Old Hall Corner, and I think he's picked up the lead of the race. Yeah, H. Sickins it is that leads the way. Andrew Morrow down into 2nd as they head through Dentons in towards Cascades. Brilliant start all the way around the outside at Old Hall, Adam.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant stuff then from H. Sickins. Paul Hogarth also making up a position there up against Faisal Al Faisal. So Hogarth is right behind his Coppa Shell adversary, Paul Simerson. That's for 4th and 5th positions. Overall, Trofeo Pirelli drivers taking the top 3 in the early going. Paul Hogarth, though, looking fast behind Simerson on this opening lap.
Yeah, so they're out of Shell Oil's corner and starting to propel the cars up towards the Britain's chicane. The speeds begin to build. H. Simmons leaps over the curb. Chasing him is Andrew Morrow. Carl Cavers is there in 3rd place. Paul Simerson, Paul Hogarth, and then Faisal Al Faisal in the all-black car complete the top 6 over Hilltop as they go flat out before they dive on the brakes and pitch the car in towards the braking area for the Hislop chicane. Paul Hogarth in the black car with the Dayglow orange flashes to it, just showing the nose of the car to Paul Simerson. Too far back to do anything, but more of a distracting tactic in the early stages. Needs to be careful though, because at the moment Paul Simerson is further up the road from him. He'll be watching his mirror mirrors because he's got the black car of Faisal Al Faisal in 6th place right behind him.
Yeah, Faisal Al Faisal will be keen to try and work his way through the Coppa Shell drivers and try and get an overall podium and indeed a Trofeo Pirelli podium out of this race. But the Pauls Simerson and Hogarth certainly not going to make that easy for him in the slightest. Hogarth with so much GT racing experience, has been racing in Ferrari Challenge UK from day one, so knows this car well. And he is going to make it a wide car, although he looks to the inside at Old Hall up against Simerson, can't quite find a way through. And as you say, now Faisal Al Faisal sees his opportunity potentially.
Yeah, that was brave stuff from Paul Simerson. Must have just known that he was clear to chop across the nose of Paul Hogarth's car, and there was just millimetres between the pair of them. So great racing from both. Paul Hogarth now will look to try and make sure that he doesn't lose any further ground to Paul Simerson. The three of them pretty much together fighting over what is 4th, 5th and 6th. It's just allowing the lead 3 to escape away a little bit up the road. So it is H. Sickins that leads the way from Andrew Morrow in 2nd place. Carl Cavers that little bit, not by much, further back in 3rd position. And then these trio of cars fighting over 4th, 5th and 6th. And I'd add into that, 7th place is not that far behind, or 8th, which is number 61, John Dillon, and Graham Dazil looking to try and join in.
Unfortunately, Stuart Marston into the pit lane at the end of the first lap. The car joined the race from the pits and unfortunately didn't go very quickly at all on that opening lap. Looks like Marston might not be able to complete this race.
Yeah, it'd be a real shame if he couldn't complete the race because he wasn't able to complete all of the qualifying session. But hopefully we'll see him back out and he'll be looking to try and see whether he can just get a good lap time in and hopefully put himself in a stronger position ahead of tomorrow's qualifying. So for the second time underneath the Warwick Bridge, the brilliant battle for Coppa Shell still continuing. It's the blue car in the hands of Paul Simerson, the black and green car rather in the hands of Paul Hogarth that sits there in 5th position. But he's compromised his exit speed, Paul Hogarth, coming out of Lodge Corner, and I thought he'd fallen into the clutches of Faisal Al Faisal, but no, he's again in full attack mode as they head up towards the braking area for Old Hall Corner. The order still remains the same. The amount of daylight between them all is not a great deal at all as they propel their way down through Cascades, and unfortunately, as in the pit lane, there is Stuart Marston's car, and it does look as though he is not able to continue in the race.
For Simerson, this is highly impressive stuff at the moment, just doing what he needs to do to hold off Paul Hogarth behind. Of course, Hogarth, who was racing in Trofeo Pirelli before this season, and then there are 3 Trofeo Pirelli cars behind Simerson, so Simerson is really doing well at the moment. Hogarth dancing in the braking zone into Shell Oil's corner, trying to find any way he can to get around Paul Simerson, but Simerson holds strong in 4th overall, leading a 5-car train there in 4th place at the moment.
It's always difficult when you're trying to defend. I always used to much prefer chasing the car ahead, or the cart ahead in my case, and trying to close down rather than looking in your mirrors and trying to second guess what the car in your mirrors is doing. And at the moment for Paul Hogarth, what he's doing is weaving around. He's trying to distract Paul Simerson to see whether he can force him into a mistake, open up the door and try and squeeze his way through. But he's in that dichotomy really. He wants to attack, he's got to be careful and might have to defend as well, because Faisal Al Faisal is not going away, but also keep your eye towards the next 2 cars in the background. John Dillon in the very patriotically liveried car with the Italian tricolore emblazoned across it is beginning to close in, and he's bringing with him the red car with the yellow stripe, which is Graham Dazil. Nose to tail still as they head up towards the conclusion of lap number 3.
I think Hogarth might get a better run this time over Deer Leap. We'll wait and see whether a move is made there. H. Sickins under a considerable amount of pressure from Andrew Morrow as well as they head toward Cascades. And Hogarth off camera has gone for the lead in Coppa Shell, and he's gotten through at Old Hall. So Hogarth did set himself up nicely out of Lodge and over Deer's Leap, as I had suspected.
Yep, so leaders still together though for the race overall. Still H. Sickins leading the way, Andrew Morrow shadowing him, and Carl Cavers, who had fallen away just on the first lap or so, now that his tyres are fully up to temperature, he's pushing and has begun to close in. Last time through, we saw the new fastest lap of the race go the way of the car in 2nd place, Andrew Morrow, 1 minute 41.241, so he will pick up the extra point for that fastest lap at the moment. And you can see the lead 3 are absolutely together. All of these cars running in. Trofeo Pirelli head over Hilltop. Speeds begin to build again. Got to be careful into towards the braking area for Hislops. You can brake quite late, but it is a downhill braking area. And make sure that you are slow in, fast out, as Andrew Morrow, I thought for a split second there, might try and prise the door open, but no, he just again is trying to, at this stage, long way to go in this race, trying to work out where he might have an advantage that he could potentially exploit. Not now, but maybe later in the race.
Yeah, I think Sickens was a little bit more careful on the throttle there between Hislops and Knickerbrook, and for a moment it did indeed look like Morrow was going to have a little bit of a go, didn't it? But hold station in second place for the time being. You saw on that camera shot at Shell Oils this time by as well that Faisal had gotten past for 5th overall as well, so Paul Simerson is down to P6 as Sickens once again feels the need to go defensive as they approach Old Hall once more. Certainly Morrow is very large in the rear view mirrors of H. Sickens.
Yeah, you can see the cars moving around on the brakes there as they just hit a little bump on the way in towards Old Hall corner, which just for a split second unsettles the car. We said Oulton Park is narrow. There's a few little bumps as well that you need to try and consider as to how that's going to affect the handling of the car, but the leading pair still together. Carl Cavers, who had caught them, has now fallen away again, hasn't he? A lap earlier, he was right on the coattails of the leading pair, but again, he has just slowed up a little bit at the beginning of this lap, I think, and has lost maybe an extra 10th or so. So he's within touching distance, but not quite as close as he was a lap prior. So onto the brakes, use as much of the curb as you possibly dare, and then get a clean exit out of the Britain chicane, fire the car over Hilltop, and it is still H. Sickens that leads the way by 1/4 of a second from Andrew Morrow, who again is too far away to try anything as they come in towards Hislops this time through. Now H. Sickens is going to have to stick his elbows out here because Andrew Morrow is looking very racy indeed and is now probably closer this time than he was on the previous lap as they head up Clay Hill.
Morrow notably more aggressive on power application. He left 11s down there between Hislops and Knickerbrook, clearly pushing on in the number 4 car. Wants to find a way past H. Sickens if he possibly can. I don't think he's going to be close enough into the final braking zone of the lap, but he has a look to the inside for Lodge Corner. Can't quite get it done. Of course, every time you lunge to the inside there, you then compromise your run slightly up over Deerleap and past the start-finish line, which in turn means a move into turn 1 is unlikely.
Yeah, the good thing is, though, he's got enough daylight between himself and the car behind that he doesn't need to worry. Further down through the order, it looks as though Paul Simerson is now coming under pressure from John Dillon and Graham DeZiel that are beginning to close in as well. So the blue car of Paul Simerson now down into 6th position, but he's got the 61 of John Dillon right with him. John, who's done a lot of Ferrari racing over the years and is thoroughly enjoying coming back to the Ferrari Challenge. And at the moment, he is sitting in what is 7th place overall after what I said was a poor qualifying for him. Side by side for the lead of the race. Andrew Morrow trying the wide line at Shell Oils. H. Sickens will hang on to the lead of the race. But all of a sudden, what was 2 and Carl Cavers falling away, we're back to it being a trio again.
I was going to say that's exactly the kind of thing that Carl Cavers wants to see, isn't it? Those are the kind of opportunities or the kind of moments that he could quite easily pick the bones from and find himself up a position, maybe even 2, as Morrow again looks to the inside.
Yeah, weaving around, trying to do anything to see whether he can put H. Sickens off. The lead 3 absolutely together. Andrew Morrow trying to get a good exit this time coming out of Knickerbrook to try and build some speed heading up Clay Hill, but the daunting right-hander at Druids is not really an overtaking opportunity, but if he can sit with H. Sickens round through the left-hand kink and through the double apex right-hander at Druids where they're heading now, then Lodge Corner would present an overtaking possibility if he can get cleanly out of Druids. But again, he's just too far away as they go underneath the Warwick Bridge and head in towards the braking area. 30-minute race. We've already had, amazingly, 1/3 of the race. 20 minutes to go. They're about to go over the start-finish line and complete lap number 6.
Exciting stuff so far in that lead 3 battle and further back as well. Of course, in 4th place now is Paul Hogarth, and he looks to be firmly in control of not just that 4th position, but also the Coppa Shell lead, with Faisal acting as a buffer between himself and Paul Simerson. But H. Sickens doing everything right at the moment. He's going defensive where he needs to without leaving that many opportunities open to Andrew Morrow.
Yeah, you could see just a little puff of dust there as he ran very slightly wide coming out of Cascades corner, and as the car loads up round through Island Bend, if he'd still got some dust on those tyres, you'd certainly know about it. Now, Andrew Morrow now, if anything, has fallen further away from H. Sickens in the lead of the race and slightly more into the clutches of Carl Cavers as they came round through Shell Oils, but by the time they get to Britain's, they'll all look equidistantly spread once more. just saw number 6, Paul Hogarth. He still continues to lead Coppa Shell. There goes Paul Simerson, who is still running in 6th place, 2nd in Coppa Shell overall at the moment, but he's under pressure, isn't he? John Dillon right behind him, and Graham Dazil right behind. So I think Paul Simerson, having lost 2 places, is now just keen to try and cement where he is, 2nd in Coppa Shell. If the 2 cars behind were to get through, it wouldn't affect the amount of championship points the blue cars score, because both of those cars behind him at the moment running Trofeo Pirelli.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think Simerson will have that in the back of his mind, as dogged of a racer as he can be. Very exciting to watch at times. I think he'll be conscious of exactly what you're describing. Didn't get the best run there up Clay Hill. May well fall prey here to John Dillon.
Yeah, nice and easy to tell what are the Coppa Shell cars. They've got the yellow sun visor strip. If the car runs in Trofeo Pirelli, then it's got a red sun visor strip. Now, good exit out of Druids for John Dillon. Can he draw himself alongside Paul Simonson? No, he's not going to be able to do it on pure power. Can't do it on the brakes because he's just not close enough. So again, tucks himself behind, tries to concentrate on the exit coming out of Lodge Corner. And as they now crest the rise at Deer Leap, is he going to present himself with an opportunity at Old Hall? Now he's too far back, so Paul Simerson, again, will just hang on to 6th position. And from the moment, John Dillon is going to see if he can prise the door open elsewhere around the lap. He's not going to do it as they head down in towards Denton's, but a good exit out of Cascades and along Lakeside could present an opportunity this time.
Dillon tries to get the power down out of Cascades, but I think actually Simerson got a slightly better run between the 2 of them as they now sweep left through the Island Bend, and Shell Oils comes up next. Still very close in the top 3, still close to 4th and 5th, and also 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th and 13th, all running in one long queue as well. Just behind this scrap, they've grouped off, but I don't think anyone is having a lonely race out there at the moment. Lots of action on circuit.
Yeah, here we go. Now this is Paul Hogarth, who is under pressure from Faisal Al Faisal. The Trophy Pirelli car cannot make its way through and ahead of the Coppa Shell machine. So it's still Paul Hogarth that sits there 4th overall and the leader of Coppa Shell. Now, is he going to try and keep Faisal Al Faisal behind? Yes, absolutely. He's a racing driver. Even if Faisal gets through, again, it's a Trofeo Pirelli car overtaking a Coppa Shell. But for Paul Hogarth, he will want to finish as high as he possibly can. Faisal Al Faisal, I think, was a little bit late on the brakes heading in towards Druids. But if anything, looks as though he's actually got a better exit coming out of the corner. Too far behind now, again, as they head up towards the braking area for Lodge Corner, as we fast approach now the halfway point of this race.
Yeah, meanwhile, Andrew Morrow was again having a look at H. Sickens on the inside going into Old Hall, but it looks as though Hogarth there just decided, you know what, discretion, better part of valour. I'm going to pull off. I'm going to let Faisal Al Faisal go past. I'm going to preserve my Coppa Shell lead. Very intelligent driving.
Yeah, very, very sensible driving. As I said, you're a racing driver, you want to finish as high as you can, but that was sensible driving by Paul Hogarth. Let the Trofeo Pirelli car go through and you will still be on exactly the same potential 15 championship points for the win. So matters not in that respect. And straight away, since letting him go, you can already see that the black number 76 car of Faisal Al Faisal is pulling away from the black and the green machine in the hands of Paul Hogarth, who now drops down into 5th position. But say more importantly, still continues to lead Coppa Shell, and reasonably comfortably, because Paul Simonson is now the best part of 4.5, nearly 5 seconds adrift at the wheel of his blue car. There he is still, heading in towards the Britain chicane, still with John Dillon and Graham Dazil closing up, and then just behind those, the other 2 cars you were talking about, which is Jonathan Satchel fighting away with the number 20 car of Paul Rogers.
Yes, and then Hunter, Smith and Dyer also having a great scrap out there as well. Hard to know where to look, but Simerson for now still 2nd, of course, in Coppa Shell, and it's much the same situation as Paul Hogarth had with Faisal Al Faisal. The 2 cars behind Simerson have no bearing on his point scoring within Coppa Shell, but of course, potentially, if he lets those 2 through, he might lose any opportunity he has to close in on Paul Hogarth. So I suppose for Simerson, this is a bit more of a difficult situation. Do you want to be diplomatic or do you want to keep your track position?
Yeah, I think if I was him, I'd be wanting to keep track position, because all it takes is a slight moment for Paul Hogarth, or a missed gear shift, or a missed braking point, and all of a sudden you're right with him. And also right now with H. Sickens for 2nd place is Carl Cavers. So Andrew Morrow is getting away now in the lead of the race, having picked it up on the previous lap. H. Sickins is down into second and is in danger of dropping to third if he's not careful, because Carl Cavers is right with him as they head round through Shell Oil's Bend. You can see just how banked that corner is as well, so the car really hooks in towards the apex, and you can probably fire the car out and get on the power nice and early because of the banked aspect of that corner. So they flick their way out of the Britain chicane, head over Hilltop on lap number 10. The lead advantage was just over 1.25 seconds last time when they came through, and Andrew Morrow now is looking to try and make good his escape and try and make it 3 out of 3 for 2023.
I think Carl Cavers will be disappointed with how this one has unfolded. I think he would have liked to have tried to find a way past Andrew Morrow and then look for a way past H. Sickins after that. Once Andrew Morrow gets to the front of the order, I rather get the feeling he has no intention of falling back into the clutches of this second and third place battle. But Cavers will be keen to get past H. Sickins. It looks to me like he might have a slight pace advantage over H. Sickins at the moment, but Carl Cavers waiting for any opportunity that may arise. H. Sickins, we saw him though defending very well up against Morrow, and you can only imagine that will continue as a trend now that he's fighting off Carl Cavers.
Yeah, Andrew Morrow has just been an absolute star since he first appeared in Ferrari Challenge UK. He finished runner-up in Trofeo Pirelli last year, 30 points adrift of champion Lucky Kira, who's moved on to other things for this year. So he'll be wanting to go one better this year, and already having claimed maximum in the first 2 races, if he can claim a third win out of the 3 that we'll have had, he will be in a very strong position in the very early stages of the championship season. Paul Simerson is still having to stick his elbows out there in 6th place. Second of the Coppa Shell cars is the blue number 77 machine. John Dillon still queuing up behind him. Looks to try and get a good run coming out of Cascades, but Paul Simerson is doing the right thing for me. He's just making sure he hits the apexes, gets cleanly off the corners, and it does make it then very, very difficult for John Dillon to try and wiggle his way through.
Yeah, absolutely right. He's placing the car very nicely indeed, and in the case of John Dillon, I think he's only going to rue this more and more as the race goes on. Of course, he had a poor qualifying, uncharacteristically lining up 8th on the grid behind a couple of Coppa Shell runners. Dillon very much in the podium hunt at Snetterton, very much a driver we would expect to be in the podium hunt each and every weekend here in Ferrari Challenge UK. And a circuit like Oulton Park, qualifying is critical. He didn't string that lap together, and now unfortunately he is kind of finding the issue with that, with not quite getting the lap in quali.
No, I think no disrespect to Paul Simmons, but I think John Dillon is the quicker car. He just cannot wiggle his way through. He's going to, again, just take a tight line in towards Druids to try and put Paul Simerson off, but then that might just compromise his exit again if he's not careful. And these two now have been dispatched further up the road because Graham Dazil can't quite live with the pace of them at this stage of the race. 11 minutes to go. The race leader has now completed 11 laps, as over the start-finish line once more comes his brilliant fight for 6th and for 7th place. Paul Simerson desperate to try and hang on to a top 6 position. As we say, even if John Dillon manages to work his way through, it would still mean that Simerson would remain 2nd of the Coppa Shell cars. Remember, Coppa Shell, yellow headlining to the windscreen, and it's red header strips on the Trofeo Pirelli cars.
Looked like Simerson was a little bit wide of the apex there going through Cascades, but manages to carry good speed out of the corner. Just to say, if you're new to the category, Coppa Shell, Trofeo Pirelli, absolutely no performance difference between the cars. The cars are identical, so there's no advantage one way or t'other in that regard. But John Dillon certainly wishes he had maybe a few extra horsepower, because Paul Simerson proving to be a very wide adversary indeed.
Yeah, the only difference is driver ability, isn't it? If you are one of the quicker drivers, you are deemed to have to drop into the Trofeo Pirelli. If you are either a less experienced driver or maybe don't quite have the pace or are early in your career, then you start in Coppa Shell, and if you start doing great things in that, you will be upgraded. So it just allows everybody to have a run with drivers of an equivalent experience or pace as well. So Paul Simerson doing a really, really good job still. He's had a busy old race, Paul, and he will certainly know that he's had 30 minutes of hard trying behind the wheel of this car. He was hoping to try and convert what was pole position in Coppa Shell to a win, but that didn't quite work for him. But now what he'll want to do is just finish as high as he possibly can. 9.5 minutes still to go. Andrew Morrow's lead has been whittled down. It was 1.25 seconds. Well, H. Sickins is pushing again once more. The lead advantage is down to 0.8 of a second, and only another 0.7 off that is Carl Cavers.
Also worth noting that Faisal is currently going faster than any of the 3 cars ahead of him. What could have been if Faisal had managed to latch on to the back of that leading trio in the Trofeo Pirelli class? And you're just pointing out there, Mark, that
Andrew Morrow's last lap.
Yeah, slowing.
Yeah, Andrew Morrow's last lap was 1.2 seconds slower than the car in second place. So that's why the gap has come down. It's not because H. Sickins is particularly speeding up. It's because it was a poorer lap, for whatever reason, from Andrew Morrow last time through. So H. Sickins now flashing his lights. Come on, crack on. I want to see if I can work my way up towards your coattails and then see whether there's any opportunity to try and work my way through and past. So the top 3, I would say, equidistantly spread at the moment. Andrew Morrow, H. Sickins, Carl Cavers. The amount of daylight between each looking very, very similar. Then we get the black car of Faisal Al-Faisal in 4th, Paul Hogarth in 5th, leading Coppa Shell at this stage, and it's going to be Paul Simerson that completes the top 6.
It's interesting, isn't it, that Morrow not quite able to get away from these two as he did previously at Snetterton. At Snetterton, both races were affected by safety cars, and Morrow had already built a lead, I think, somewhere around 8 seconds, and then had to do it all again in the closing stanza of the race. And this time around, he's very much got a closer match for himself in the form of both Sickins and Cavers behind.
Yep, so downhill through Cascades. This is lap number 14 that they're on at the moment. Make sure that you use all of the curb on exit, but not much more than that. And this morning you would not want to have touched those curbs because it was so wet here at Oulton Park for free practice 1 and free practice 2. Now the gap had stabilised last time around. It extended again by another 1/4 of a second almost, so it was exactly a second from Andrew Morrow to H. Sickins. But through the first sector of this lap already, H. Sickins is pressing on again, looking to try and close the deficit. Through Shell Oils goes the 4th place car, the all-black number 76 car of Faisal Al-Faisal. He will look to see what he might be able to do, the man who finished 6th in Trofeo Pirelli over the course of last year. And you could see he got very close to the curbs there, because one of the marker boards on the inside of the Britain chicane, he managed to tap and knock it over there. So he was using all of the curb, but no more.
Yes, clearly on the edge, Faisal Al-Faisal pushing on, seeing what he can do. Of course, they haven't had much time as he lays down a nice 11 there. They haven't had much time on a dry track, so I suppose if you've got the clear space ahead of you, you may as well try and push and see what your limits are going into potentially qualifying tomorrow, and of course race 2 on the Saturday here at Oulton Park. Faisal definitely putting on a bit of a show though, quite the exhibition.
He's certainly on the ragged edge, wasn't he? As he was in free practice 2, wasn't he, where the car was wiggling around on him on a few occasions. The problem is today is that, yes, whilst it was dry for qualifying, we've now got the dry race. The circuit will have evolved because it was very wet this morning, slightly drier for free practice 2, but still wet. Then it was a dry circuit for qualifying, but no rubber had been laid down, so the grit level would have changed all the way through qualifying, and now we've got a bit more rubber down. It must be a very different circuit even to qualifying. So every single session, the drivers have had quite a lot to learn, quite a lot to understand, and get the car to react differently to the changing conditions that we've had.
I note as well that the gap is coming down between the Pauls, Hogarth and Simerson for the Coppa Shell lead, and things equally close in the overall lead.
They are, yeah, just coming out of Island Bend now, or Shell Oils, and up towards the braking area for Britons. Andrew Morrow is feeling the pinch a little bit, and you can tell because he leaps his way over the curbs midway through Britons, because he's got H. Sickins right with him as they come over Hilltop, and Carl Cavers is back in on the mix as well. So the top 3 equidistantly spread, and all within probably a second and a half, couple of seconds of each other. With 5 minutes to go, time and opportunities are running out for a shuffle of the order here. H. Sickins was leading early doors. He'll be desperate to try and work his way back into the lead, but for the moment, he's got to watch his mirrors, because Carl Cavers has got a really, really good run coming out of Knickerbrook up towards Druids.
Yes, Sickins ran it a little bit wide there through Knickerbrook, and Cavers absolutely nailed the apex through the corner, and suddenly Sickins finds himself in a position where he's having to watch the mirrors again. It ebbs and flows, this battle, doesn't it? Morrow makes a little bit of an error. Sickins is suddenly on the back of him. Then Sickins drops back from Morrow, and Cavers is looking for second place. It's been a bit of a tennis match.
Yeah, it's been good value, this one. Thoroughly enjoyed round 3 of the 2023 Ferrari Challenge UK Championship, and whether it be this battle here for Trofeo Pirelli, the top 3 that are just heading down the avenue and through Dentons and in towards Cascades, all the squabble that we had in Coppa Shell in the early doors. It's been good fun. Now, John Dillon, who was right up with Paul Simerson, has now fallen away in 7th place and has dropped right into the clutches of Graham Dazil. And Graham Dazil gets a really good run as they come over the start-finish line up towards Old Hall Corner. Jinx one way, Jinx the other. Graham Dazil takes a tighter line, wider line into the corner to try and get the overlap on the way out. John Dillon is wise to that, so covers off the move as they head down in towards Dentons. Good little fight that is. It is for position. It's for 5th and 6th in Trofeo Pirelli. It's for 7th and 8th overall.
Yeah, interesting dynamic between the two. Dazil has had a couple of looks to the inside at turn 1, Old Hall, in the last 5 or 6 minutes, and certainly John Dillon not securing that position. I think any hope of getting past either Paul Hogarth or Paul Simerson is gone. He's now got to preserve that 7th overall, and as you mentioned, that 5th place within Trofeo Pirelli. Dazil has fallen off the back a little bit through that first sector, but still don't think he's fully out of the fight.
A good fight going on towards the tail of the field as well, which is number 82, Paul Hunter, having to stick his elbows out to try and keep the number 69 of Chris Smith right behind. So no matter where you look with 3 minutes to go, there are scores to be settled and squabbles to be had out there in round 3 of the 2023 Ferrari Challenge UK. Flicking their way through his lops up towards Knickerbrook. John Dillon, I think, has managed to gap a little bit more Graham Dazil over the course of this particular lap, so he's not quite under the pressure that he was last time that they came up towards the top section of the circuit. So round through Druids now. Takes the first apex, John Dillon, grabs the second, tries to get cleanly off the corner, just runs a little bit wide and flicks a couple of stones up there, but with 2.5 minutes just under to go, they'll be heading on to their penultimate lap of the race this time through.
Look at the interval between the two cars ahead of them as well. Paul Hogarth, Paul Simerson. It's 1.2 seconds, and Simerson has been there or thereabouts behind Paul Hogarth for the last couple of laps. I just wonder whether Coppa Shell may not be signed, sealed or delivered just yet.
Yeah, it's just making sure that you pace yourself appropriately, isn't it? Because if you push too hard early on, and we've seen them laying rubber down at some of the corners, you're going to use up maybe the best of the life of your Pirelli tyres, bouncing over the curbs, go the top 3, absolutely together. Andrew Morrow used all of the curbs. Then a split second later, H. Sickins bounced over the curbs. Carl Cavers did, but not to the same degree as the pair ahead. So the leading trio are just turning their way out of Knickerbrook and starting to climb up Clay Hill once more. They are on lap number 17, and next time they come over the start-finish line, they'll be heading on to their final lap of the race.
And there's the battle with Jonathan Satchel leading Paul Rogers. This is for the final podium spot within Coppa Shell, of course. So Satchel for now holding strong in that position. It would be a great bounce back for Paul Rogers after the incident he referred to on the grid walk at Snetterton. It would certainly be great for him to stand back on the podium, score some solid points, of course, after a disappointing turn of events in Norfolk a few weeks ago. But Satchel doing everything he needs to do to retain that position, 9th overall and 3rd in class for the time being.
Yeah, Paul Rogers lost time in one of the free practice sessions earlier on as well, so he's looking to try and mount a challenge to hoist himself onto the final podium spot in Coppa Shell, and will have this lap and only one more thereafter to do it, because for the final time Andrew Morrow is just turning his way round through the left-hander at Island Bend and then onto the brakes at Shell Oil's corner. Andrew Morrow won both of the races at Snetterton, and at the moment, having started from pole position here, he is looking as though he is going to pick up the win, and at the moment also has the fastest lap of the race as well. So it's going to be maximum points, 17 in total available for the race if you include pole and fastest lap, and that's looking as though that's what he's going to add to his tally.
Yes, certainly Andrew Morrow would be delighted to continue the hot run of form that he carried out of Snetterton. He's got just about a third of a lap between himself and the checkered flag. We saw H. Sickins flashing the lights as they approach his lops. He's trying to stay in the head of Andrew Morrow. Morrow just needs to navigate a couple of apexes and then he'll see the line.
Yep, he certainly will. And for Andrew Morrow, he has been an absolute star so far this season. and came away from Snetterton with maximum points. You get an extra championship point if you enter the round. Well, everybody's going to get that, so it certainly looks as though it has been the best possible start to the second weekend of racing. And as he heads out of Lodge and crests Dearly, round 3 of the 2023 Ferrari Challenge UK goes the way of Andrew Morrow. He comes through to claim the win. It's going to be H. Sickins in second place, and Carl Cavers not that far away in third position over the start-finish line. The squabble still continuing for what will be the final podium spot in Coppa Shell as well, because Jonathan Satchel is still fighting away with the car that sits directly behind him, which is Paul Rogers. But for Jonathan Satchel, hasn't got to cling on for much longer, just a couple of corners to go and he'll be there.
Meanwhile, the Coppa Shell leaders coming across the line now. Paul Hogarth crosses the line to take 5th overall and his 3rd consecutive win in Coppa Shell ahead of Paul Simerson. Dillon and Dazil are due across the line next. They do cross the line in the same order they were previously. Looks as though Jonathan Satchel is going to hold on to this place too.
It certainly does, yes. So for Jonathan Satchel, that will be his 2nd podium overall in Coppa Shell for this year. So he finished 3rd in the 2nd of the 2 races at Snetterton and picks up here at Oulton Park, where he left off at Snetterton, and getting himself onto the podium, but only just chased all of the way to the start-finish line by Paul Rogers, who will be pleased with 4th after the disappointment of Snetterton. He'll be pleased with that one. But it is Andrew Morrow that claims the win as he slows the car down and is waving to the marshals and the spectators around here at the circuit. It's a good haul of points for him. Had to work hard for that one, because whilst he started from pole, Adam, he didn't lead all of the race.
No, that was certainly the biggest challenge of his season so far for Andrew Morrow. Had to fight back in a major way up against H. Sickins, while also at one point under significant pressure from Carl Cavers. I think Andrew Morrow can come out of Friday here at Oulton Park with head held extremely high.
Yeah, so it's a 3 out of 3 for Andrew Morrow in Trofeo Pirelli. It's 3 out of 3 for Paul Hogarth in Coppa Shell. So both of those drivers at the moment seem to be the drivers that have the subtle advantage, not by much in the case of what we've seen over the course of that race here at Oulton Park, round 3 of the championship. But certainly we'll see what happens tomorrow. It's due to be dry all day tomorrow here at Oulton Park. There'll be a separate qualifying session ahead of tomorrow's race, so it's not as though any results from today dictate or have any influence on the grid for tomorrow. There is a separate qualifying section, session 4, round 4 of the championship. But the weather, unlike today, scheduled to be nice and sunny and warm ambient temperatures all day. So the cars making their way in towards the pit lane area. We will get some reaction from the drivers down there as well, but we should also be able to confirm the results for you. Andrew Morrow claims the win by a couple of seconds in the end from H. Sickins, who finished in 2nd place with Carl Cavers in 3rd, and Faisal Al-Faisal was 4th. 5th, but the winner of Coppa Shell was Paul Hogarth, only just in the end, though, by 0.8 of a second from Paul Simerson, who came through to finish in 6th and was 2nd of the Coppa Shell cars home. Then it was John Dillon and Graham Dazil, and in 9th place, Jonathan Satchel will wrap up the Coppa Shell podium. 10th place goes the way of the next car that was up, which was Paul Rogers. Then it's Peter Hunter, Chris Smith. Julian Dye was the last of the finishers, and for Stuart Marsden, unfortunately, he was not able to complete the race. So a brilliant first race that we have just seen from what was the 3rd round of Ferrari Challenge UK here, and you can see already the drivers out of the cars and looking to chat to their pros, chat to the engineers, and chat to their fellow drivers and discuss the final points of what was a very exciting race.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that Faisal Al-Faisal will be one to watch later on as we go to the highlights.
Let's have a quick look at the highlights then of round 3 of the championship. When the lights went out, it was Andrew Morrow on pole, but H. Sickins took the lead all the way around the outside at the first corner. In the early stages of Coppa Shell, Paul Simonson led the way, but for H. Sickins, his lead was short-lived because it was midway through the race where, having run side-by-side in towards Shell Oil's corner, eventually Andrew Morrow would look to try and pick his way through. Opportunities were few and far between, but he would finally work his way into the lead of the race. H. Sickins down into 2nd, was then coming under pressure from Carl Cavers that would sit behind. As for Paul Simonson, he'd lost the lead of Coppa Shell, was coming under pressure from John Dillon. There were other good battles going on further down through the order, including towards the tail end of the order, where Peter Hunter was being kept very busy by Chris Smith. However, Paul Hogarth for the lead of Coppa Shell was caught towards the end by Paul Simonson. The win in the end would go the way of Andrew Morrow, which means he would keep his stranglehold on the championship. So that was the highlights of round 3 here at Oulton Park. A further race to look forward to tomorrow. And you can see a large intake of breath, water on hand. Delighted drivers in there in the pit lane. Paul Hogarth, quite rightly so, is pleased with the win in Coppa, and so he would be. Had to work for that.
He really did, yes. Right in amongst it with Paul Simonson there, managed to get past him quite nicely at one stage down towards the first corner at Old Hall, and then had to deal with Simonson charging back towards him towards the end of the race. Of course, you mentioned before the highlights that today's results have no implication on the Saturday, and we'll just look at the standings.
Let's have a quick look at what the standings look like then after the third round of the championship here. Andrew Morrow extends his gap in the lead of the championship. He's now on 52 points. 16 points behind him is Hans Sickins, or H. Sickins, and it's Carl Cavers that is there in third place, but there's only a couple of points separating those two. John Dillon is fourth, ahead of Faisal Al-Faisal, and Graham Dazil is sixth in Trofeo Pirelli. Those are the current standings after that race that we have just seen here at Oulton Park. Well, those were the Trofeo Pirelli standings. We've also got Coppa that we need to consider as well. And in terms of Coppa, well, it's now a 15-point lead for Paul Hogarth, and up to second in Coppa is now Paul Simonson. Jonathan Satchell moves up to third in Coppa, but there's again only 3 points separating those two, and from second down to fourth in Coppa goes Stuart Marsden after his problems. Chris Smith is there in fifth place, ahead of Peter Hunter, Paul Rogers, Julian Dye, William Terrier, and Robert Rees is 10th in Coppa. So those are the current championship point standings, subject to official confirmation after the race that we have just seen here, what is round 3 of the championship, but the second weekend of racing. So the cars all in the pit lane. We will hopefully get some reaction from down there very shortly, but we've got it all to do again tomorrow as well, haven't we? Qualifying session, and hopefully if tomorrow's race is half as good as that one, it'll be a belter.
Yes, and I think that some of the drivers who showed good race pace just now, the likes of Faisal Al-Faisal, you know, didn't get quite the qualifying he would have liked. However, going into tomorrow with another qualifying session, Faisal will be looking to maybe front row, second row, and potentially trying to get a podium. And as we saw on those standings, Faisal hasn't had the best start to his season so far. But of course, it's still early doors here in the first 2 weekends of the year. And if he can get a solid result on Saturday, that could lead him into a positive second half of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. That's still his best result of the season, wasn't it? Because he wasn't able to complete the first of the 2 races at Snetterton and finished 5th in the second of the 2 races there. So 4th place in that race means that, yeah, that's not a bad haul of points for Faisal Al-Faisal. 8 points for finishing in 4th position. And I think most of the drivers will just be pleased that the rain has disappeared. So with the cars now trundling their way back down the pit lane, I think post-race we can hand you for the first time down to Brian Oliver, who's managed to catch up with one of the drivers.
Just before we go for the podium presentations, I've just grabbed Jonathan Satchell. What a battle was that with Paul Rogers at the end of the race?
Well, it was actually the whole race. I mean, literally, he was behind me for the whole time. I mean, it's great. I mean, I have a huge amount of respect for him. He's normally quicker than me, so I was thinking any time now, and there were 1 or 2 moments, but I managed to hold him off. And it's a great experience. I've never defended for a whole race before successfully. So
brilliant stuff. Did he ever nearly get past, or did you have it all in hand for the whole way?
So down to the second chicane once, he was right in my mirrors, and I had to move across. But apart from that, no, I think I had a bit of a gap on him. And when we got to the top of the hill, I think Struids, he come round. I was going into that faster than he was. So he was up my chuff, and then I got away from him.
Absolutely brilliant. It was thoroughly entertaining. Congratulations on 3rd place. Thank you.
Yep, so great to chat to Jonathan Satchell. He was certainly a busy man there, wasn't he, Jonathan Satchell? I mean, to be fair, I think every driver was busy because they were either having to attack or defend. Everybody was in a group with somebody to have a good fight with.
I think Faisal Al-Faisal was just about the only driver to really have no worries at any point in the race. Once he got past Paul Hogarth, he had a bit of time to himself. But yeah, that was a unique circumstance today.
Unique circumstance. So let's just have a look at some of the beautiful slow-mos of these cars heading round through the Oulton Park circuit. You can see this morning just how damp it was for Andrew Morrow as he negotiated the Britain chicane there. And you can see the plume of spray that H. Sickins was putting into the air with the windscreen wipers going. blowing and the Pirelli slick tyres nowhere to be seen, as they had no choice but to utilise the wets. Interesting to see also, largely there, Carl Cavers staying off the curbs, the right thing to do when the weather is damp. You don't need to touch the curbs because all you're going to do is cause the car to react very differently, and you don't want to be on the throttle when you touch those damp curbs. And you can again see that from the beautiful sunshine that we'd have if you weren't here at Oulton Park this morning for free practice 1 and free practice 2. Very, very different conditions. It's like 2 different days, isn't it, that we've had here over the course of so far this morning, really.
Yes, indeed. So this, of course, our Coppa Shell podium that we're taking a look at here. And we just heard from this man, Jonathan Satchell, third on the podium. I think given the amount of pressure he was under from Paul Rogers, he'll be rather glad that this is the sunshine we've got now because, well, woe betide, you have to deal with all of that pressure and the inherent difficulty of wet conditions. It has been a day of 2 halves and a race that didn't feel like it went half an hour, I would say.
No, so Andrew Morrow, H. Sickins and Carl Cavers will be the people that head towards the podium. In Trofeo Pirelli and in Coppa Shell, it will be Paul Hogarth, Paul Simonson and Jonathan Satchell that will be the top 3 in Coppa Shell. They'll be heading towards the podium celebrations that will be taking place very shortly here at Oulton Park. And then once those have been conducted, we can set things up for tomorrow. So I think we're ready to head towards the podium, which means it's time to hand you back downstairs to Brian Oliver.
Down at the podium here, we are getting ready to go. What a fantastic race that was, utterly enthralling. We're going to go for the Trofeo Pirelli presentation first. The driver who was there or thereabouts right the way through the race. In third place, Carl Cavers. In second place, he held the lead for the first part of the race, but eventually it had to be second place. Put your hands together for H. Sickins. But taking the top step of the podium for the 3rd time in 3 races, your race winner, Andrew Morrow. So our trophies are going to be presented by, we're very pleased to have a Ferrari official GT driver, James Collado here, presenting the trophy. So 3rd place to Carl Cavers. And the 2nd place trophy to H. Sickins. But Andrew Morrow, he's going to need a bigger mantelpiece because he has yet another trophy, taking it from James Collado, the winner of the 3rd race of the season, the first race of this weekend. That's Andrew Morrow. And also a 2nd trophy, that is the Pirelli trophy to be presented. So another one of those. Fantastic. Now we should also have a representative from Stratso Manchester, our winning team here. So have we got the representative? Bring him on up to the podium from Stratso Manchester. Fantastic, thank you, and also receiving a trophy. So there we go, a quick pose for the photographs. I'm just going to steam in and grab a quick, if I may, if the mic's going to hold together. Andrew, that wasn't quite as easy as Snetterton, was it?
No, definitely not. It was an exciting race. It was tough. Anime had quite a close race, but no, it was good. I enjoyed it. So glad to be here.
So H. Sickins got you at the start of the race, and then you got past him at about the halfway phase. But then he closed back in on you in the last kind of 5 minutes of the race. Were you having issues? Had you made a mistake?
No, just tired, starting to go off, and I suppose getting a bit tired, so just had to focus and get the end of the race, but thankfully we managed to get there. So no, it was tough, but it was a good race.
Brilliant stuff. Well, you must now be thinking, I could make this 4 out of 4. So we're going to see what happens tomorrow. So Andrew Morrow, your winner in the Trofeo Pirelli, 1st place. And we're just going to move out the way for some photographs. There we go. And while we're posing for photographs, trophies high. And now, oh dear, here we go. I'm going to hide behind somebody because that awkward moment where the champagne goes everywhere, the celebrations. Wonderful stuff, really entertaining stuff. Thank you to all the Trofeo Pirelli drivers. Let's hope for another race like that tomorrow, because that was really, really thrilling stuff. So there we go, that was the trophy presentation for Trofeo Pirelli. So now the time has come for the Coppa Shell trophy presentations. In third place after a race-long battle, let's hear it for Jonathan Satchel. There goes Jonathan, brilliant stuff. In second place, a driver who has been enjoying his day. Every time we've spoken to him, he's had a massive smile on his face. And he's got a big smile on his face now because he's in second place. It is Paul Simerton. But the driver taking the top step of the podium yet again. Another driver to have made it 3 out of 3. Your winner in Coppa Shell, Paul Hogarth! Okay, we're going to call the team representative up now. So this is actually from the team Stratso Manchester. So. No. It's me, Francesco. Sorry. Okay, here we go, yes. Presenting the trophies. We'll do the team trophy afterwards. So the third place trophy. I only spoke to him on the grid, honest. The second place, here comes the third place, the first place trophy. And now we'll request the team representative from Stratso Manchester to come and receive the trophy. Here we go. Here we go. It's all about running order. Right, there we go. So squeezing up on the podium. So we're going to have another quick word. So another quick word with our winner, if I may. And this is also getting a bit of a habit. 3 out of 3. And you had a lot of hard work, though, out in the middle of the pack there.
Yeah, it's a good habit. I'm quite happy with it. Let's keep it rolling. It was great. We had a fantastic tussle for 3 or 4 laps where I tried a few things and a few dummies. And it was good to get past and then try and maintain the gap. But he was closing in on me all the time towards the end.
So it was hard work holding him off for the full duration.
It is when you get to my age.
Brilliant. Can you go one better tomorrow, do you think?
I'm going to stick it straight up in this tomorrow, in every way possible.
We're going to be watching for that. There we go. 1, 2, 3 in the Coppa Shell category, posing for the photographs. And then in just a few moments, we will once again run for cover because the champagne will explode. So I'm just going to keep well out of the way. Ladies and gentlemen, your 1, 2, 3, the perfect rocket launcher. Brilliant stuff from the podium here at Oulton Park. That's the end of race 1. Now back to your commentators.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Brian. Great to see the drivers celebrating there on the podium. But that's it for today from the Ferrari Challenge UK here at Oulton Park. From Brian Oliver down there on the podium, from Adam Weller, who's joined me in the commentary box, and myself, Mark Werrell. Thanks for joining us for all of today's action. But we will be back tomorrow when we will get qualifying underway around about 10 o'clock in the morning. Of course, we'll have that second race later on in the afternoon. So from all of the team here, thanks for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.